Hey toy collectors, welcome to another super exciting, outrageous toy review. Today we are taking a look at Ninja Force Snake Eyes from G.I. Joe. Snake Eyes has always been one of the most popular members of the G.I. Joe team, and this version of Snake Eyes, while might not be the most well-remembered and the most classic version of his costume, definitely got a lot of publicity time and was important to a lot of kids back in the early 90s. Snake Eyes was the first and only vintage G.I. Joe figure I owned from the Ninja Force subset, but I was very familiar with the sculpt and action features of these guys because I had several of the Street Fighter figures that came out around the same time. This Snake Eyes was the second to last vintage G.I. Joe figure I ever bought new in the package as a kid. I believe I was in 6th grade, and I got him at Ames on the way to the dentist on a day off from school. And I picked him out because, one, he's Snake Eyes, and Snake Eyes is just cool. We hadn't had a new version in a while. And also, he came with a ton of weapons, which I thought was kind of a neat concept because I bought a lot of my figures as a kid at yard sales, so I had guys like Quick Kick that didn't have his sword, and this gave me a menagerie of accessories I could dole out to other characters. This Snake Eyes has a black, almost like a hockey mask type helmet. Generally, Snake Eyes wears a mask with a visor or goggles. This one, he seems to have, like a balaclava type cloth mask over his head and then this metal face shield. The earpiece almost makes me feel like it could, hinge back, spin up to lift up, but I kind of doubt that. There would be no reason for him to do that, and there is a little strap that goes around the back here, it looks like. Those small eye holes, I always wondered if that would hinder Snake Eyes' vision a little bit. Not that the visor was that great that he had on version 2, but looking through small eye holes seems like that might hamper your vision out to the sides and things like that. I don't know. Maybe there's all kinds of ninja technology built into this mask anyway. As you move down the figure, he's dressed mostly in black, which is a great traditional Snake Eyes color. He does have some blue highlights. Again, not a bad color for Snake Eyes, although this is a little bit bright, for my opinion, but as far as Ninja Force guys go, this is pretty good. And then he's got lots of silver details, like the grenades and ammo packs and things like that. My biggest problem with this figure, though, is to get his action feature to work. His sculpting is pretty terrible. His shoulders come down here and then drop off like a cliff to get to his arms. And when you move down to his legs, you see he doesn't have standard G.I. Joe hips there. All so we can get this. Whee! Look at Snake Eyes go, Mom! He's kicking Cobra's butt! Here's a carded copy of that Ninja Force Snake Eyes. You can see they used a lot of pink in his packaging. The artwork here, it looks pretty decent. He is holding his larger, the sword I always refer to as a scimitar, and he's throwing his dagger. Unfortunately, the small parts warning covers up most of that. Over here on the side, we have a little blurb that tells us he's got the Basami Slice action. Basami Slice! Oh my goodness. We gotta buy this guy now. Down below, you can see the wide array of blue accessories that he came with that are all on a little plastic tree. The back of his package tells us a little bit about Ninja Force and shows off the other Ninja Force Series 2 figures, as well as, I guess, a couple from Series 1. Wasn't Slice, Bushido, and Bonsai available the previous year? Below that, there's cross-off for DEF and Battle Corps. He should have a flag point here, but somebody removed it. Yo, what did they mail away for? Did somebody need a Ninja Viper so bad they cut the file card off the card without taking Snake Eyes out of the package? Down at the bottom, you get a file card for Snake Eyes. It's pretty standard for that era. These are the ones that I don't really think were written by Larry Hama anymore. They were stealing bits and pieces from old file cards and making up some new stuff and giving everybody a bunch of bullet points on the side here that are numerated out to explain every little detail on the figure. Snake Eyes has articulation at the neck. It is very odd. I don't know if it's the internal mechanisms, but his head always wants to return forward. When I turn it to the one side, it'll stay to the other side. But also, it's a swivel. It's more like the original 82-83 articulation than the ball-jointed heads we had starting in 1985. His arms appear to be standard G.I. Joe arms, with the hinge and swivel at the shoulder, the swivel at the bicep, and the elbow bends. But these are actually attached to his mechanism, so they do ratchet around when you move them, and they kind of only click in certain spots. You can jiggle that motion with the two arms. I actually think you get more motion out of it that way than squeezing his hips. Although my guy seems to be loosening up and doing a little more action now that I've been playing with him for a little bit. Maybe his spring was getting a little funky in there. Snake Eyes has, like I said, lots of details. He's got these giant elbow pads in blue for crushing guys. He's got some grenades, little tiny grenades. He's got this giant blue belt that I think is weird. And like I said, terrible hips. They can go out forwards. He can bend at the knees, which is pretty standard for G.I. Joe. Actually, a pretty good range of motion there. He's got huge knee pads for knocking the teeth out of Cobra's faces. He's got a gun on one hip. He's got a knife on the other hip. So this guy is loaded for bear, and that's just the sculpted on details on him. His back is a little bit more plain than his front, but they didn't not paint details, so I think that's a pretty good thing. As far as accessories go, Snake Eyes comes with this large sword. This is the one I always referred to as a scimitar. It's probably the one I used the least. He came with this other sword that's about the same length that, to me, this is like the standard ninja sword. This is what I want my Snake Eyes to be armed with. Loved that sword quite a bit. He came with another smaller, shorter sword with a very wide blade. This is the one that I would lend a quick kick a lot. But if you want Snake Eyes in combat with two swords, I think this is a better pairing than the scimitar. He's got a small knife. This is the one that the artwork depicts him throwing on the package. This was kind of fun. It actually looks a lot like the one sculpted on his hip, so you can kind of pretend he took that out. He comes with two sets of claws. Now, Wolverine was all the rage. The X-Men were very popular, so maybe that's the reason they included these. The only time Storm Shadow ever used them in the comics that I can remember, or the first time he used them, was the previous costume, his pre-Ninja Force, like 88 costume, the white one with the digital camera. And he used climbing claws to scale a wall. So that I thought was really neat, and that was one of the cool things about these weapons for guys to use. But they don't stay on super well, so I never used them a whole lot. And he came with a set of nunchucks. I thought these nunchucks were pretty darn cool. I never had quick kicks. I never had the original Storm Shadows nunchucks because I didn't have those guys, or I got them at yard sales as a kid. But this set was pretty durable. I never worried about breaking these, even like the 90s Ninja Turtles or late 80s Ninja Turtles. The Michelangelo nunchucks broke very easily. These I thought were pretty durable, and I was careful with them. And his final accessory was a blue figure stand. Alright, Snake Eyes is all armed up and ready for combat. Yeah! Oh wait, he doesn't get to say anything. Kind of reminds me of Kermit the Frog flailing around there a little bit. Here's the coolest and toughest and most overrated G.I. Joe doing his impression of the toughest and coolest and most overrated X-Man character. His claws are actually staying on pretty well, but what I always found was if you attack somebody... Oh wow, they're staying on. Oh, there we go. That was what I usually remembered as a child. Claws just popping off. It's actually staying on pretty good. I must have done a good job of sticking it on there. Actually, what I'm doing is putting the one handle through his thumb there. I hope you can see that. As a kid, I never did that. I just would snap it on over his forearm. And they just don't stay on. They would always be popping off. Sticking that in the thumb hole does seem to help that a little bit where he's not losing his claw. But there was a lot of frustrated moments in combat with Cobra Vipers and things like that where those claws would go flying off. So Ninja Force Snake Eyes got some time in the comic books. He got time on the Ninja Force TV commercials. He got reused for Shadow Ninjas later. This Snake Eyes was pretty iconic for its time. I don't feel like it stayed in those upper echelons. People talk about Snake Eyes version 1, Snake Eyes version 2, even Snake Eyes version 3 with the crisscross knives on his chest. I would almost say that the one that followed even that one, the one that people don't like, he's kind of blue and he's got orange goggles. I think that one's almost more iconic than this one, which is kind of interesting. I'm not going to say that Ninja Force Snake Eyes is a bad figure, but he certainly isn't a great figure. I bought him as a kid, didn't really realize how much the playability was going to be hampered by his articulation. I was more disappointed with the hips that made it so he couldn't really kick well than the ratcheting of the arms. That didn't bother me a whole lot. I played with him some, like I said, because it was a new figure and a new design for Snake Eyes. But I quickly went back to just using a different version, an older figure that was more playable and more posable. So I gotta say that he's kind of a dud. I recently reviewed Dice. I think I'd take Dice as a new character over Snake Eyes. I think Dice's ninja feature is much less intrusive. His flying dragon, which is like a hip swivel thing. This Snake Eyes doesn't even have hip articulation there. He can't twist at the waist at all. It's just so, I don't know, so disappointing that this kind of a kick with no outward side motion just is really disappointing, and that's what I didn't like about Snake Eyes. Thanks for watching this super exciting, outrageous toy review. Make sure to like, subscribe, and check out our other videos.